All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So you gave me this collection of sources about Hawaii, and I have to say it goes way beyond the usual tourism brochures.
Yeah, that was the idea.
So our mission today really is to filter out that postcard noise and get to the heart of the 50th state. We're looking at its geography, its history, and its pretty surprising path to actually becoming a state.
And right off the bat, there's a detail in these sources that just, it completely changes the lens. When we think of a state joining the U.S., it's usually all civics lessons and peaceful transitions.
But the material for Hawaii just flips that script. What was the specific detail that really jumped out at you?
It's how candid the documents are. They directly link Hawaii's official inclusion as part of the U.S., that was August 21st, 1959, to a history of, well, violent struggle.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We're talking about a direct, explicit historical link.
Yes. The material we reviewed literally states that the Declaration of Statehood followed years of war with the native population. I mean, that's an extraordinary piece of context to start with.
Right.
It immediately tells you that the story of Hawaii isn't just about geography. It's about this deep geopolitical friction that was recorded right alongside its final integration.
That definitely promises a challenging, but I think a necessary look at what's shaped the islands. But you can't really understand that conflict without first understanding the place itself. So let's start with the basics. Its name and its location.
Right. And if you believe location is destiny, then Hawaii's destiny was sealed from the start. It's a complete outlier.
The sources really drill down on three geographical facts that make it so unique. The first one is the most obvious one, I think. The sheer physical separation. It's the only U.S. state that's completely separated from the continental U.S.
And we're not talking a little bit of water. We're talking about, the tyranny of distance. That isolation affects everything from the price of milk to how its own plants and animals evolved.
Right.
And historically, that isolation also made it an incredibly valuable strategic asset. It's like a fixed aircraft carrier in the middle of the biggest ocean on Earth.
And that strategic value is, of course, central to why the U.S. was so interested in the first place. But there are two other identifiers the sources point to. What's the second unique fact?
It's the only U.S. state that is an archipelago, a huge chain of volcanic islands.
So it wasn't settled like a single piece of land.
Exactly. Each island, Oahu, Maui, the Big Island, they all developed their own character, their own political structures, long before they were unified. It's like a collection of different worlds under one banner.
And here's the third one that I found fascinating because it places it globally, not just nationally. It is the only U.S. state located in Oceania.
And that, I think, is the core of its cultural distinction. Being way out there in the North Pacific, but firmly inside the geographic and cultural world of Oceania. It means Hawaii shares these deep ancestral connections with island nations far to the south and west.
Polynesia, Micronesia.
Right. Its identity is tied to that vast ocean world, not really to the North American continent.
That reframes the whole conversation, doesn't it? It means when the U.S. annexed Hawaii, they weren't just adding a territory. They were kind of absorbing an entire cultural sphere that was already defined on its own terms.
Precisely. And you could even hear that distinct identity in the way its name is spoken.
Yeah, the sources were very specific about this. We all know the English version, but they get into the Hawaiian pronunciation, Hawaii.
It's all about that little mark between the two eyes. It's called an okina, and it's not just decoration. It signals a glottal stop.
A glottal stop, like the little pause and uh-oh.
Exactly like that. Uh-oh. So instead of Hawaii, it's more like Hawaii-e. There's a slight catch. And sometimes the W sounds a bit more like a V. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about respecting the original language and its history.
It's a reminder that we're talking about a place that had a very sophisticated, established identity long before it showed up on a Western map. And that leads us perfectly into the timeline. Let's pivot from the geography to the deep roots, the people, and that first moment of contact.
To really get the culture that Westerners first encountered, you have to go back centuries. The sources point out that the ancestors of native Hawaiians were these incredible navigators, part of that great Polynesian expansion across the Pacific.
So this was not an empty land.
Not at all. One of our sources, it looks like a translated text, calls the inhabitants the Suku Hawaii, the Hawaii tribe, or people, and it confirms they are direct descendants of the Polynesian people, or Turun and Bangsa Polynesia.
So we're talking about centuries, maybe 1,000 years or more of rich history before Westerners even arrived.
A deep, complex, and stratified society. And then everything changes on one specific date.
January 10th, 1778, the English explorer James Cook.
That's the moment. That date is the turning point when this isolated island kingdom is suddenly put on the global map.
And the impact of that contact must have been immense.
It was catastrophic. I mean, the sources don't sugarcoat it. With that discovery came devastating foreign diseases. Measles, syphilis, influenza. The native population had zero immunity.
The population collapse was just heartbreaking. And if you have a society that loses a huge percentage of its people in just a few decades, that puts incredible stress on all of its structures.
It does. And it also introduced new powerful things. Iron, which totally changed the balance of power between chiefs and then, the whalers and missionaries who all came with their own interests.
So what starts as exploration quickly turns into commercial and religious interests.
Which then paves the way for the big geopolitical moves of the 19th century. You have this ancient Polynesian lineage, but the clock is suddenly ticking very, very fast towards foreign control.
And that tension brings us right to our final section, the complicated path to becoming the 50th state. We know the date, August 21st, 1959. But the sources just refuse to let us see that date in a vacuum.
Absolutely not. This is where it all comes together. That 1959 Declaration of Statehood was just the final move in a process that the sources themselves defined by conflict.
Let's go back to that phrase because it is so powerful. Statehood followed years of war with the native population. When the records say that, what are they actually referring to?
Well, the historical context is pretty clear. The war isn't one single event, but a long struggle for land and political control. And the pivotal moment, the real start of the conflict they're describing, was the illegal overthrow of the monarchy.
Queen Liliuokalani in 1893.
That was the point of no return. A small group of American and European businessmen, with the backing of the U.S. military, just removed the queen. They ended the kingdom.
And that act was met with resistance.
Immediate armed resistance. Uprisings from Native Hawaiians trying to restore their queen. That struggle, the resistance to the new government, the resistance to annexation, the jailing of the queen herself, that whole period makes up the years of war.
So the 1959 statehood wasn't a peaceful merger. It was just codifying a reality that had been fought over for more than 50 years.
Exactly. It frames statehood as the end result of a protracted struggle, an outcome that was only possible after significant native resistance had been, suppressed.
This is why the source material is so vital. It forces you to look at the history, not just for dates, but for the political weight behind them. It makes you ask, what does it mean for a state's creation to be so directly tied to conflict?
And that history is not just a footnote, it's the origin story. Whenever you see movements for indigenous sovereignty or land rights in Hawaii today, it all connects back to that 1893 overthrow.
So let's try to synthesize all of this for the listener. We've gone from the island's total isolation in Oceania to this sophisticated Polynesian civilization to European contact in 1778 through a century of conflict and finally statehood in 1959.
And what's so fascinating is how all those pieces still exist at the same time. The geographical anomaly, the deep Polynesian roots, and the story of integration defined by conflict. They all create this incredible dynamic tension.
You could almost argue that tension is what makes Hawaii's identity so resilient. Its distance and its deep cultural roots have let it hold on to an identity that is still so separate from the mainland, even after all this time.
I think so. It requires a much more nuanced and, frankly, a more respectful view of the islands than what you get from a travel magazine. It's a story of survival meeting empire.
So, as our final thought for you to take away from this, if the very historical sources defining statehood acknowledge that it followed years of war, consider how that challenging context continues to shape the unique political priorities of the islands today. The land rights, the language, the sovereignty movements.
Yeah.
Does a state born out of that kind of conflict ever really make a simple peace with its own origins? A powerful question. We hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, more complex, and more necessary view of this truly unique part of the U.S. Until next time, keep digging.